Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for another transfer speculation video. But before getting into today's video, I would like to point you in the direction of our existing transfer speculative videos in regards to players like Jacob Sorensen, Dennis Mann and Przemysław Poketa. But yeah, if you could just check them videos out, I'll be very grateful. I'm very keen to know your thoughts on them players, as I will be keen to know your thoughts on Bali Mumba after this video. But yeah, we're on a bit of a hot streak at the moment, as I mentioned in the last video in regards to these transfer speculative videos, because as is often the case, a lot of names are being touted with Norwich, and I'm looking to pick out the ones that I think are the most interesting, but also the most likely, because it's good to sort of have that balanced scale in terms of just generally being interesting, but also being realistic. And this is a signing sort of on that theme that I think is realistic and also very exciting and interesting. So, Bali Mumba, what do we know about him? The first thing I'll do in this video is I'll rattle through what we know in terms of facts, and also what I think he'll bring to Norwich and perhaps the intention behind the transfer. Now, what we know about him is that he's currently at Sunderland. He's 18 years old, 19 in October. He has played in right back, defensive midfielder and central midfield. I think he played a game in right wing as well. He's made 17 appearances in the Premier League 2 this season. He's played 10 games of senior football in his career. And also in terms of his positioning, he's played 30 games in the middle being central defensive midfielder and central mid, in centre mid, sorry. He's played 14 games out on the right, where I think 2 of them are in right wing or right mid, whatever you want to call it, and the rest in right back. Now, I have here in quotations that he is probably going to be a utility man for Norwich City, which I think is a position that is sort of necessary. We don't have too many, I don't even think we have any utility men at Norwich City, and what that means in terms of football is a player who can play more than one position. I'm sure we're all familiar with the term. They're very important players at football clubs. They're often the club legends because they're players who can put in a shift in any position. They're the most useful for a manager, and I think it would be good for Norwich City because we've been stricken with injury this season, then who's to say this couldn't happen next season? And with a player like Bali Mumba, providing he's not the one who gets injured, he could say, play central midfielder, and say our right back gets injured, he can then switch to that position, and a potential injury crisis isn't as much of a crisis as it would be. But yeah, so that is all we know about him factually. And there are 2 main things that I take from this transfer. The first being the fact he's a utility man, and the second being that he's young. So I won't say any more in terms of his utility man status potentially at Norwich City, because I think that's all that needs to be said. But the main thing that excites me is the fact that he's a very young player. He's 18 years of age. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a list of names that we all like, we're all familiar with, that, you know, young players these names are, that Daniel Farke has developed into being fairly decent players. So, to start the list, we've got James Maddison, Angus Gunn, Harrison Reed, Josh Murphy, James Maddison, Emi Buendia, Max Aarons, Jamal Lewis, Ben Godfrey, Todd Cantwell, and now we've also got players like Adam Eder, Josh Martin, and potentially Akin Famewo coming back to Norwich City and sort of arriving on the scene. Now, all them players we all regard very highly at Norwich City, even if they're not here, even if they won't be here next season. These are young players that Daniel Farke has developed strategically, is also worth remembering. And his general just player development, I described it as on our podcast with Stuart Hodge, which you can still check out. It's still a relevant podcast, answering whether Farke should be sacked or not. As I said, I described it as player development, and his player development at Norwich City has been brilliant. Now, off the top of my head, I can't remember any other younger players that he's developed in his time at Norwich City, so please feel free to shout at me in the comments down below if I've missed any. But where this links to Bali Mumba is the fact that he's a very young player, and I think Daniel Farke could get the best out of him. And I think he'll want to as well, for the reasons that I mentioned before, such as the fact he's a utility man, and a utility man is one of the most important players to a manager because he provides us with the cover and the depth, you know, all in one player rather than going out and buying loads of players. So I'm very excited to see him come to Norwich. Now, in terms of actually watching him play, I've not seen him play, but we are sort of aware of the fact that Daniel Farke and Stuart Webber potentially regard him very highly because they want to sign him, but also I think he's valued quite highly at Sunderland. Now, they have a bit of a thing for youth players, don't they? I think they had a player called like Josh Madger, who's now at Bordeaux, as a very young prospect, exciting prospect once. So it'll be nice to for Norwich City to sort of pick off one from Sunderland and develop him as our own, as we did with Ben Godfrey. Obviously, he was at York before Norwich City. But yeah, just, you know, there isn't really much to say. The questions I have for you in the comments down below is, what do you think of this transfer? It's an impossible one to judge at times because, you know, he's got very little experience, so there's not much to go off in regards to what we've actually seen, what we could see, what we can Google about him. Google's a wonderful thing, but it doesn't provide too many answers in terms of Bali Mumba because he's not played that much football obviously because he's 18 years old. But as I said, for the reasons that Daniel Farke is such a good player developer, the fact that he's potentially a utility man for Norwich, and just the fact that he's generally quite young, it should provide you with enough excitement for this transfer. Do I think he'll play for Norwich City next season in the Championship? Potentially. If we're in the Premier League, I don't think we would have. Perhaps I think we would still be looking to sign players like this in the Premier League. However, we won't be in that league next season, so I think there is a chance we could see him. What position do I think he'll be deployed at? At Norwich City, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. Now, I speak with a lot of certainty, I'll say quickly, about this transfer because of a Pinkin article that I read, written by Connor. That will pop up on the screen right now. There'll be a link for it in the description box down below. So I think this signing is going to happen. It basically says he's signed for Norwich City, so it's sort of written there that it should be happening. But yeah, make sure you go and give that article a read. I think it's just about the transfer window opening, and it mentions in passing that Mumba should be joining Norwich City, as is the same with Jacob Sorensen, another very interesting player. But yeah, that's all I know about Bali Mumba, to be honest with you. I'm very keen to know your thoughts down below in the comments. I probably will be contacting some Sunderland fans to see what they know about him and what they can tell us. And if they provide an update that is sort of decent, then I will provide you with an update on this YouTube channel. But, you know, it's a very short video, as I said, for the reasons before that. This sort of player is quite hard to judge, but I'm very keen to provide you with updates and sort of a bit more information rather than just sort of compilations of players, so we can get to know them as much as we can before they join Norwich City. But yeah, that is just about everything for this video. But overall, I'm very keen to know your thoughts, as I've already said. What are you looking for from this transfer? I think that's always an interesting question in terms of an individual perspective. What are we looking for from a certain player, from a certain transfer? But yeah, please check out the description box down below for the socials, the Spotify and iTunes. I think we'll have another one of these videos coming out after this one based on a player called Sebastian Soto, keeping up the hot streak of transfer speculative videos. But yeah, that's just about everything, and until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.